I'm gonna record this. Perfect. Well, again, welcome everyone for showing up. This is great to have everyone here. These are coaches from Idaho as well as Oregon. So you may have a mixture of both in here because you're both kind of starting at the same time and in the same time zone, so it makes it useful. And I'll just start off with a couple things. We're going to go through, I'll tell you a quick little bio about the people that are involved in tennis reporting. This will be real fast. Kind of the reminder of the pain points that we're solving of why are you even doing this? How are we a little different? What we're finding for success. That'll be very short, couple minutes there, and then we'll get right into how to use the system itself, just as a reminder. So anybody who's returning coaches, you use it for a short period of time once a year, so it's nice to get that reminder. And then two, anybody who may be coming as a new coach, or you're taking over a team that had an existing coach and you need help just getting signed up or allowing yourself to log in, we can help with at the end of the webinar today. So if there's any long-term questions or anything that's coming on, you can stay on at the end. I'll stay on as long as needed. Anybody else who has their questions answered can just leave. So it should be a fairly quick webinar here that we're doing. And so if you have any questions while we're going through it, let me know. So I'll do an introduction. So my name is Chad Hendricks. I'm one of the founders of Tennis Reporting, but I am not actually a tennis player. So the other two that are involved are Steve and Lindsay Matichewski, husband and wife team. They've been coaching high school tennis for 18 years, I think now. They played in college. And what happened is I had wrestling software for middle school coaches, and they said, we really need something for tennis. And I was really curious on why they said that. And so the pain points that we're really trying to solve here is we're really looking for a few things. One, results for individuals could just not be found any longer anywhere. Coaches weren't necessarily sending them in to the newspapers and to the media outlets. So it really was preventing us from being able to scout teams and scout players. And with the media not showing those results and coaches not submitting results anywhere, it was really difficult. We also had, when we first started this, everyone was still using essentially the paper scorebook. And when we got to the postseason, it was requiring us to make copies of the same information over and over again to submit to the state. So it's individual results, double results, the whole scorebook itself. And so it was just a lot of tedious work that didn't need to happen. And then unfortunately, when people got to the postseason and they're trying to figure out what's the seeding supposed to be, it just happened that maybe sometimes coaches, accidentally miss certain match information that just happened to seem to help their player in the seeding process. And so by having all this data in one spot and available, it really made it so that everything was fair and equitable when we were looking at that. And then finally, we finally got to the point where the coach's information was good and we were getting that done well. And then we made it easier for the state association itself. So now submitting players to the state for the postseason, it was a hassle. Now it's essentially being invited to an event, choosing your players and clicking submit. So it's like a 2-minute process for doing that. So how we are different, we are specifically set up to provide value to the coaches. So in the end, anytime we're evaluating a new feature or what we're going to do, if it's something that helps the coaches out, that's our number one priority. It's not necessarily to the fans that can see things or even to the players or even to the association. It kind of goes in order of coaches, association, players, and then last is fans. So that's our order of what we find the most important. So we want to be able to complete all the end of the season paperwork. We want people to easily submit results to the media, allow for scouting, and really for any coaches that have to be on seating committees at the end, that they have all the information, right? We provide everything from common opponents to head-to-heads and all the scoring in one easy-to-see thing. Now, as we've made it easier for state association and for coaches to submit those things, we are now at the point where we do provide for some states online brackets. Some states still have their own system in place, but that's the point we're getting where there's online brackets for everyone to be able to see that and report those scores. So what we've seen thus far in the states that we're operating in, we're essentially getting 100% of all the high school tennis results. So there's no longer accidental missed results. The postseason paperwork and the submission is one click to submit that. CD meetings are way faster. We're talking about 15, 30 minutes versus hours long. And so that's really where we're at this point. It's been a huge benefit to people using the system, and having all that data means that we can actually do something with it. What we find with a lot of other systems, Some coaches use it, but there's not enough value for the coaches to get everyone to use it. So that's where we're sitting. So I do want to get into the actual system itself and show that. So now at this point, I would say hopefully the system is very easy to use. It's meant to be easy to understand and figure out. I think the oldest coach I've worked with was like 75 last year. He said he liked it. So I figure if we can get a 75-year-old guy who didn't grow up with technology to like it, probably can get anybody. And really anybody else that feels technology adverse, an ideal situation might be appointing a student manager who enters the information for you so you can concentrate on the coaching. So there's plenty of coaches that do that as well. So the idea though is everything will be entered before you even leave the court if you use your phone. Some people will actually wait and they'll write things down still, the results, and then use the computer later. However you find easiest for that. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and get right into it. So let me move some things over here. All right, first things first. When you get to the home page, one thing that is interesting is we will start to, if you select a state you're in, it will start to pull up all the information that's currently coming in. So Alabama's already started their season, so it's kind of good, easy to use them as a basis point. So on the home page, you'll start to see most wins, most for boys, girls. In this case, if you have co-ed, it'll show up as well as we call this TRPR. It's the ELO rating, which is eventually probably going to get phased out. It'll be incorporated in a way, but we are working on finalizing an actual automatic seeding formula so that the system will seed players at the end of the season for everyone. So that's where we're at right now on the home page. First thing we need to actually go over then is I'm just going to go left to right into the navigation bar. So the first thing here is the roster. Now, in the roster area, two areas, we have managing the roster and lineups. Lineups are probably used by maybe half the coaches. Half the coaches don't use it, so it's not a requirement, but I'll show it to you in case you do want it. So we'll go into manage rosters. Pretty easy in this case. Any player that you need to add, all your players from the previous season are still going to be in there. The system does automatically grade out anybody who was a senior. And so at some point in the summer, it actually bumps everybody up a grade. So all the grades should be accurate from last season. If you need to add anyone, though, you're just simply filling out this information on the top. The only things that are required in here, first name, last name, in the grade. So if you want to put the other things in there, that's for your own benefit to use it as a database. But once you would add those in, you simply hit the little plus sign over here and it'll add a player into your roster. With most things, this plus sign is almost like a rarity. Everything else that you do in the system, for the most part, is once you click on something and change it, it automatically saves. There's no save button anywhere. So if there was a mistake on someone's name and you need to enter it in, as soon as you enter that in, it successfully updates it and changes that right away. So there's no save buttons anywhere except for really one spot, and it's not even a place that you're going to use often. So really making changes are easy, and this is the roster page. So this will carry over from year to year, and the grades will upgrade as we go. Any questions on rosters? Anything that anybody is thinking on that piece? All right, silence is acceptance. So we'll go on to the next piece. So in manage the lineups itself. So if I go into lineups, what this does is once you go to create an actual match, you can select to add a lineup into the roster. So you're not individually selecting players. It'll add those singles in there for you or the doubles in there for you. So, and you can have as many of these examples as you want. So in this case, you can look at singles or doubles. So if I wanted to create a lineup, I can create a name for it. So test lineup. I can decide that this is a singles lineup or a doubles lineup, and I'll just add that lineup. Once that happens, any lineups in here, I can just click on. You'll see this little arrow right here. If you see that in the website, it means you can click on to maximize that, and you simply select the players that are going to be in that lineup, and that will add it automatically into the system when you're creating a match. Once again, as soon as you add anything in there, it automatically saves. So there's nothing you really have to do at that point other than selecting the players and have it available. Any questions on that lineup section? Okay. The most used section of the website is the reports. So I'll show that right now just because it is most used. Once you go into reports, there's three real options. There's these reports, there's the compare page, and the most wins. The most wins is really just a page where we're starting to actually compile all the data for the home screen. So there's nobody really goes to that one. Where everybody really is going all the time is the reports page. So once you click on reports, there's a couple options. First one is I want to view my own school. So the big red button allows you to view your own school, and it's going to pull up this year's record. So you can always go back to the past years. The only years that will show up are things that actually have some type of results in it. And so you can look at that, and it's an easy way to get to your school. Once again, there's a little drop down arrow here. So if I click anywhere on this bar, it's going to open up the information for that match, and you can actually see the individual results itself. And everything on here is clickable. So when you see a player's name, you can click on that player's name to go into that individual player's record, which I'll show you as we go into some real records in here as well. The other option is to start looking at some of the other schools that are in the system. So I've selected my state of Wisconsin. I can look at an existing school that I know is in there. This was Stephen Lindsay's school. I like showcasing their school just in case they have a bad year, because then you can know they're not the perfect coaches, even though they're here at Tennis Reporting, even though they've done it 18 years. So we can look at their last season, 2022, have that pull up. See, they were 10-8 last season, and this will have all their results in it. So at the end of the year, these are some major their sectional competitions that happened, and then we can go further back to look at some of their head-to-head matches with other teams. So once again, can click in there, look at any of these players. I can click on a player from that year. It'll go to that individual player's record page, and so then it'll bring up that information. So allows you to get into there, see everything that you would want to see, scores, other people, and it will separate out by singles, and there'll be a section for doubles if they've played any doubles as well. This is the most used section of the website. So I'm sure a lot of people will click on that, and especially other players and fans. The compare page is a page that you can use. Typically, this is used towards the postseason. There's an even easier page if you're part of the seating committee of how it looks. But essentially, this allows you to compare two players and see exactly their head-to-heads as well as their common opponent matches and what the results of those were. So you can feel free to play around with that to see, if I'm going up against another person, what should the seating actually be? And you can look at that at any point. Any questions on the reports section? Okay, moving to the next one to the right, we have ratings. This is where we're going into the ELO rating. So the ELO rating system, just kind of give a brief example of what that is. Typically, people think of that as in chess. It essentially says you have a rating and I have a rating. If I have a higher rating than you, I am supposed to win the match. If I win, I will gain some points, but not as much as if I would win against somebody who has a higher rating, because I was supposed to lose according to the rating until you get a larger bump. So it's taking into account the strength of your opponent when you're looking at that. We also have that with like tennis reporting our own, as well as I'm thinking of now my brain is going blank. Sorry about that. I can't think of who's the big one that's always putting out the ratings. Someone help me on this one. UTR. Thank you. I thought of it finally. UTR uses an ELO rating as a starting point too, and then changes it. So we give extra bonus points for like a flight 1 versus a flight 2. So the higher flight that you are actually going in, the more points and the more benefits you'll actually get from that. Or if you lose, it's actually less of a penalty than if you were in, say, a flight 4. And so that's kind of how we tailor out that. Usually the flight 1s are going to be going towards the top of this. So if I looked back at like 22 ratings in Wisconsin, I could go back in here and see these are the top rated players who has actually graduated from that previous year and what their ELO ratings were to see where they would line up out.
Do you actually check to see at the end of the year how accurate this is compared to actual results of the state tournament?
Yeah, typically what you'll see is the best players do go at the top, but when I look at the overall results, the problem and why we are looking at changing ELO to a straight up, there's a seeding calculation, is that in a state, you can have a wide variance in the number of matches that individual players get. And unfortunately, you can only get a higher ELO rating if you play matches. So someone who plays 30 matches in a season versus somebody who plays 15, they might be equally skilled, but their ELO rating is going to be very different. So this is why we won't use an ELO rating as a seeding system, because you can't, if everybody was playing a bunch of matches and we were in the professionals, sure, you could do that. But because of rural versus urban schools, you have a lot of variance between that. So although you will see a lot of these players end up in the state tournament, I can tell you there was somebody like that was ranked like this Ethan Bowe actually I think ended up being like third in the state tournament, even though he's much further down on the ELO rating. So that's where we're putting in a seeding calculation actually, and that'll kind of take over once we get that finalized.
So
So
yeah,
how
have
we
you,
do use this though is
yeah.
it's like the last place. So if we have a head-to-heads, obviously a head-to-head takes precedence, common opponents. Where this will get used is if you have like the three-player rotation where player A beats B, B beats C, and C beats A, so you can never really tell. The last thing we'll look at is an ELO rating to say, oh, well, we'll give this player, the higher seed because they have the higher ELO rating, which should meant that over the course of the season they had stronger opponents that they played against. So
You mentioned the flight
yeah,
calculation, but that can also go the other way because you might have somebody that's extremely high in flight one, and then the second flight person is, you know, say two levels below that person and more, let's say, of an average high school top, flight one type player. Essentially, like, what if your top player is like a D1 player level and your number two guy is, say, bottom D3 kind of player?
hmm where we
Um,
actually see the biggest problem, Daryl, is actually in the powerhouse schools where we have the one, two, and three players are all
yeah, they're
really flight
really
one
high.
skill. They're all
Yeah.
highly skilled. That's where the most of the issues come in for people is because of the
Yeah.
highly skilled players, and that's where we struggle the most.
Yeah.
Because they're saying, well, they're as good as the flight one, and it's like, yeah. So that is why it's not a perfect system and why we have to change that out.
Yeah. I know from a seating perspective, we kind of run into that, right? Where
hmm
somebody's number two could be stronger than somebody's number one.
Yeah, and it's very difficult to discern between those things because you also want to say, well, we know that they're really good, but they didn't have an opportunity to prove it because they've been playing against flight twos all year, and so it's a difficult thing. So we've even looked at in the seeding calculation. Okay, the previous state tournaments, where did they end up, and what does that look like from a bonus essentially? Because we're still almost using the ELO as a background thing, but then using that adjustment based on head-to-heads and common opponents, and even
Mhm.
like past results. It does work in tennis a little bit because it's not a team sport, right? So you can really say that that individual really did place, third in last year's state tournament, and so that also is part of what we're looking at for and putting in the equation as well.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, as you can tell, it's not. It's very difficult sometimes when you have powerhouse schools or you have rural schools, and there's a lot of different scenarios and situations that make it a little bit difficult.
Sure.
Good. So that's one thing to look at. I will say probably this gets looked at a lot more by players than anybody, just because they think it's interesting to see where they supposedly line up, and that'll change as we change the system. Last area. Well, I'm going to go into the meets, but one thing I want to share with you before we get into the meets, the little person icon here. There's only really one section that I want you to go into, and that's in the user preferences. And now this will show name, phone number, the division that you're in, all that stuff. But the important piece to get set up is your media contacts. Once you put the media contacts in this area, they're in there all the time. So when we are in a match and we want to say, oh, we're going to submit the results of this event to media, this is who it goes out to. You can put in there media contacts, you could put in vice principals, administrators, the athletic director, you could put parents, students. It doesn't matter who you put in there, but anybody you want that information to go out to on a regular basis, throw in there one time and then it's in there permanently. And the most useful thing. And there's only, you know, there's only, this is the only spot in the website where you click save preferences. And that saves this box as a whole, and that allows you to do that. So that's the only thing I would say. Get that in line right away, and then you'll be good. Now, going into the actual meets and putting in a match. So if I go to meets, there's 4 different areas in here. I'm going to create one. That'd be a new one. I can view existing, which is going to bring up a calendar, which will show anything that's in there. So I have one in there for tomorrow as this test. This is also if someone is sending you an event saying, hey, I've submitted scores, please double check that the scores are correct. It'll show up in here as well with a little red dot. And then my invites in all events are really meant for the postseason. So as soon as you get into the postseason, you'll be invited to events, which will show up in the my invites. Will allow you to select the players you're submitting for that event and just hit submit. We will be sending out additional instructions as we get into postseason, just to remind everybody what that process is like. But it's really easy, and there's not really much concern on that area. So I'm going to go into actually creating an event because that's the meat of what you're going to be using and want to get done. So as soon as you create this, step 1, you create a title. So this could be, you know, versus the other team. You could call it the ads invite, whatever you want to call that event. And then you're selecting a date here. This postseason meet, right now you don't need to select that even if it is a postseason meet. This was a leftover from some states have specific reports that they want run for the association, and they wanted the postseason event to be in a specific area of that report. So that's what that's there for. You don't have to worry about that because your states haven't asked for that specifically. But once you do that, if you just click on proceed to step 2, that's going to bring you into the actual invite itself. Couple areas. So this bar right here where it says approve and send for approval. Once you have all of the information in, you're going to click that. That'll send a notification to the other coach saying, I've entered this information in. Feel free to check the scores. If the scores and everything are correct, they'll simply click approved. If there's something that's incorrect, they'll send you a note back that says, oh, you know, flight 2 was actually 6163, not 6160. Things like that. What we have found as soon as we place this process in there, it's like 96% accurate the first time. There's hardly any notes going back and forth. I don't know what the change was. And before, what we had was both coaches would put in the information, the system would check if there was a difference, and then if there was a difference, it would highlight it. When we did that, there was a lot more errors being put in by coaches. For some reason, this putting it in there and then getting it approved has had a lot higher success rate in getting accurate information. Now, your team will always be listed under this My Team area, and then there's a versus box. So this is where I'll start putting in the opposing coach's school, or I could put it in the city. It doesn't really matter. As soon as I find them, I click on them. Now, one thing that's important from a record standpoint, if you're going team against team, you only put one opponent in there. So if you're going to a try and there's going to be 3 opponents, but you're not doing all one event, it's meant to be a team versus team event, you're going to be creating 3 events, one for each opponent that you have. If your players are going to an individual tournament where it's not a team tournament, you can put all of the opponents in here. It doesn't matter. And in fact, that's the preference, because the system knows that if there's more than one opponent in this area, that it's an individual tournament. It's not going to affect your team record. It's only affecting those individual player records. So when you have a team, just put one in there. Now, at the beginning of the season, if a coach has not put their roster in and they're missing people, and you get to a match and they don't have it in there, you are able to actually add players to their roster. You're not able to edit existing players. You're not able to delete players. But if they didn't go in there and put in some of their players, you can add those players. Typically, this only happens when we add a state the very first year. After the first couple of years, this never gets used again because everybody goes in there and adjusts their roster ahead of time and they know what they're doing. But in cases of new coaches, you may come across that, and that's why that option is in there. The other piece now is this coach information. As soon as you enter that visiting school, the coach's information is going to show up, so their email address and their phone number. You can allow them to be an editor of the event. What that does, it allows them to also go in and they can enter in scores. So if there was a reason to do that, especially in maybe like the individual tournaments, you might do that where you allow that coach to handle the coaches the flight two matches, and you're handling the flight one, or however you're handling the boys, they're handling the girls, however you want to do that. Typically, though, that's not used as often as I would have expected it to, or why we even put it there as an option. Typically, one coach is putting in the information, and then they're sending for the approval afterwards. There is no tried and true rule as far as what coach is putting the information, but almost like the unwritten rule is if you're the home coach, you're putting in the information. The only real exception that I've seen is if one coach is like, I just want to control everything, which we have that. There are some coaches that will just control the whole thing and do it all for you. I guess the only other time that I've seen it is if one coach is really kind of tech adverse, the other coach just offers to do it. All we ask is that at the beginning of the match, decide who's doing it. If there's any like question, typically kind of goes to the home coach. At this point, we would start entering matches in. So on your phone or on the computer, you're clicking on singles matches. This is where the import lineup can come in handy. So if I import the lineup, I can say I want to import my top singles lineup. It's automatically going to put the names of my players in there. And now I'm simply selecting the opponent that they're going against and who the winner school is and putting in the score. So in this case, I have these defaults. I'm putting in the opponent. I'm choosing that it was my school that won, and I'm putting in the score. I can either do 6-0 on the keyboard, or I can put 6-0 or whatever that score is. And really, it's just everything that you would want it to be anyway. There's also the options for retirements and defaults. So if you have a default in there, the default goes in there automatically as the 2020. I can also do a retirement if that's the case. And really, tiebreakers, this allows for, if you have to put in double digits, you get into the third set tiebreakers. Every state is different, so I always forget which states use what rules. So really, if you're a new coach, just ask one of the existing coaches how they handle certain situations. Because what I found is there's not any continuity or standard amongst state to state. So it's kind of difficult for us to follow and to figure that out. Same thing, then there's the doubles matches. Put that in. And then as you're putting in these winners, these are affecting the team scores for showing like my school is now two wins, 0 losses in this case. If this varsity notes and junior varsity notes, this is only for your eyes. This doesn't show publicly anywhere. So feel free to use that, but know that it's just for your information. And then down on the bottom, there's 3 buttons. If you need to go back because there was the wrong date or the wrong name put in for the event itself, you can click on the Edit Match Name and Date button. If the other coach put the information in and you were finishing up and found out, you can delete a match. But really, that doesn't happen very often. And then this is what I like the most is we can submit the results to all your media contacts by essentially selecting that button and then reviewing what that looks like. It's kind of the old school newspaper outlay, and this will go to all those people, and you just click send, and then that part is done. Questions on creating a match? All right. Well, I will give an example of, let's see, I think I have one example up. Let me see.
My first question is very vague. Not, I'll just ask it. The first time I go to use this, if I get lost and need help, what's the easiest way to reach out to somebody for some help?
Yeah, there's 2 ways. So we will be providing both a cell phone number that you can text, but essentially tennisreporting@gmail.com is used like a texting service. So if you email that, that comes to all 3 of us, and that comes like immediate notification. You'll get an answer back from somebody immediately. The other thing that's nice is now that we've had a year of already working within the states, a lot of times the other coaches that you're working with have already used the system as well. So feel free to also ask whoever you're with too.
Nice.
Yeah, it's one of the areas that I'm really happy with because we've pretty much had a lot of compliments on how fast we get back to people when there is any type of question. And typically you're going to either hear from myself or Steve. We'll be one of the two people that you're hearing from. Let's see. Yeah, where's my other screen? Oh, there's the other screen. So as a coach, when you have another school that has created an event and sent it to you for approval, you'll see this view existing meets, and there's a notification by that, and you'll see that that meet actually comes up. Now, in this point, I could actually click approved if I know that all the scores are correct and I agree with the result, or I can always say reject, and then I will reject with my note that says, oh, flight 1 winner is wrong, and then reject that. That'll go back to the other coach as a note. They'll get a chance to adjust it. They'll send it to you back for reapproval. But what I have liked is that we've only seen mistakes being made very rarely now at this point. So hopefully you don't have actually much to do with that. But just in case it does come up. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. I'm taking over for another coach this year, and he sent me your email. So is there a login that I should be using? Is that something he should do to transfer ownership or login credentials?
Actually, the easiest way will just be to hang on with me right here. I'll actually log into the backside of the thing, and I'll actually change it for you right now so you don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Hey, Chad, just for those that may watch the recording, we've been telling people from our association, if you don't have login information or whatever the case, just go ahead and email the tennisreporting@gmail.com, and then you guys are, I can attest that you're really quick in getting back, and you'll get them logged in and give them any help they need.
Yeah, just verifying the coach process when there's coaches changes it's always kind of not a easy, clear-cut process all the time. We will be actually looking at doing some with that. Some states are actually using some other systems for when coaches register, and can we just tie directly into those softwares and systems so that your information will be updated right away and you wouldn't have to contact us. So those are a few things that we're trying to do to make it easier for coaches as well. Good. Well, anybody who needs any help changing it out, please stay on right now. As far as I can go right in the backside and change all of your information so you can logged in. But other than that, everyone else, thank you so much for showing up. And if you have anything, tennisreporting@gmail.com. Otherwise, have a great season.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jack.